Chapter 30. Author's Message to Readers. Dear readers, thank you. Thank you all who have responded to Anastasia with kindness and understanding. Indeed, I could not imagine that she would actually be capable of arousing so many feelings and emotions. I would so like to answer all your letters individually, but for the time being at least, this is physically impossible. The last lines of this book were penned in the Caucasus, where I have joined local archaeologists and enthusiasts in investigating the dolmens Anastasia spoke about. And we found them, saw them with our own eyes, took pictures. They are ancient stone constructions, 10,000 years old. They have functional significance even for people living today. They are located in the south, in the mountains of the Caucasus, not far from the cities of Novorossiysk, Gelezendek, and Tuapse. They are the precursors of the pyramids of Egypt, but the local residents didn't pay any attention to the dolmens, not appreciating their purpose. Even though the dolmens were classified as historic monuments, they were ransacked by the local population. Their huge stones were carted off, and even used to build a church in the settlement of Beregovo, which to me is nothing short of sheer blasphemy. Perhaps it was for this reason that 40 priests were cruelly tortured to death in the Kuban region during the revolutionary period of Russian history. 1 priest for each dolmen stone. People carried these stones off, not fully appreciating their significance. Now that Anastasia has spoken about them, all this will change. It is amazing, but a fact. Much of what she said has already been confirmed. And even the fluctuations she talked about, the background radiation of the Earth fluctuating near the dolmens, have been detected and reported on local health officials. Out of all the things Anastasia told or showed to me, I have decided to publish only what has been directly or indirectly corroborated by scientific experiments, material objects, or historical facts. Though I am starting to think that we'd better simply listen some more with our hearts. It would be quicker that way. The other method of confirmation takes up an awful lot of time, as with the dolmens, for example. It took me pretty much half a year to collect historical data and trek through the Caucasus Mountains to see the dolmens with my own eyes and take pictures of them. I was, finally, convinced. But at the end of the day, it turns out that if I had simply believed right off, I could have used this half year to greater advantage. It turns out that a great deal depends on one's ability to believe. I did get a chance to visit Anastasia a second time. I got a chance to see the son she bore, and how she relates to him. A most unusual relationship. In addition, I had the opportunity of finding out from the people who ferried me to the spot on the riverbank about the various attempts on the part of both individuals and groups to penetrate Anastasia's domain and find her dwelling place for themselves. Many, no doubt, wished to see and talk with her out of well-meaning motives. But the people who ferried me also told me about groups of scoundrels who set up camp on the riverbank, sent out a helicopter to take pictures of the area, and tried to capture her. She was obliged to emerge from the taiga to talk with them and then send them packing, despite their attempts to restrain her physically. I shall tell all about that in the second book. I only asked people not to touch her, to leave her alone. Now, after the experience with these rotters, local hunters have taken it upon themselves to shoot strangers on sight. That's bad, of course, but I say, let them shoot. Let them shoot. It turns out the local hunters knew about her existence long before I came along, only they never told anyone, and they never encroached upon her territory themselves. The locals talked with her only when she came out to them. I started having pangs of conscience for having told about her without hiding the location, especially in the first edition of the book, and for not changing the names of people I mentioned, or even the name of the ship. Anastasia calmed my fears a little when she said, "Never mind. After all, I was the one who wanted to reveal myself to everyone. But I am wiser now. I shouldn't have mentioned specific names, and in the future I shall try to be more circumspect. But still I want to emphasize, please don't disturb her. She herself will tell everything she feels is necessary to reveal. We must not do to her what we have already done to one Siberian family, the Lykovs, described by Vasily Peskov in his article, Dead End in the Taiga. As far as I know, the only member of this family remaining is Agafia, who is dying of cancer, left helpless, taken out of the taiga. A real tragedy how things have turned out. The Lykov family lived in the taiga for many years, but died out after contact with our enlightened civilization. Which way of life, then, is the real dead end? I can understand why so many people want to contact Anastasia, but it is impossible for her to meet and talk with everyone. And after all, Anastasia does have a young child. There is an Anastasia Club, or community organization, operating in Glendzig, headed by Valentina Larionova, an ethnographer of 30 years' experience. She has organized a group of local ethnographers, along with people from a variety of professions, who are sensitive to the spiritual legacy of their region and its ecological problems. This was one of the first clubs to be organized by readers of the Anastasia book. The members of the Glendzig Club have made what is, to my mind, a remarkable discovery. On the basis of information provided by Anastasia, they have restored to Russia, and quite possibly to the world, the forgotten shrines of our ancestors, and are now receiving people wishing to visit them and conducting tours to the places mentioned by Anastasia. About Glendzig, for example, Anastasia had this to say: "This city could have been richer than Jerusalem or Rome, but because of its rulers' neglect of its primal origins, this city is dying." I believe this, and other cities and settlements will be restored, not by the rulers of this world, but by the hearts of ordinary people aroused by Anastasia. And there's more. Anastasia is now the subject of conversation among many healers, wizards, and preachers. "We are like ants compared to her," said the chairman of the Healers Foundation, Vladmir Megre. I have seen a video recording of a speech given in front of a large audience by the leader of a religious domination, in which he referred to Anastasia as the ideal of womanhood to which we should all aspire. He added, "Her ability to draw inferences and conclusions and level of intellect far surpasses that of our population today." This video is now being copied and distributed. Much of the same type of reaction is coming from people with extraordinary abilities living in India. Still, another religious leader said that while Anastasia is currently studying her life, she has not managed, unfortunately, to meet up with a real man. Later I was told that there is only one chap very much like Anastasia living in Australia, and that the two should meet. I, of course, do not have any pretensions to being a real man. Far from it, even in my thinking. But perhaps it is still premature to think in terms of arranging a marriage. And isn't it right to idealize and it isn't right to idealize her to such an extent. It is this idealization of Anastasia that has prevented a timely recognition of what she has done. Just think calmly and rationally about what has happened. A child has been born, and I have held him in my arms. I have heard his little heart beating. There is a child. He is growing up, but he has no official birth certificate. He will grow up and want to go somewhere, maybe abroad, for instance. Maybe he'll want to see the world. Who will issue him a passport to travel abroad? What country is he a citizen of? What shall we tell him then? Oh well, you know, somehow we haven't thought about any documents for you. You just stay here in the taiga. I checked with a legal firm on the question of the birth certificate. A lawyer said Anastasia would have to give birth in a hospital. Then, even if she didn't have a medical birth record, they could have at least issued her a memo regarding the birth, which she could have used to obtain a proper birth certificate. The other alternative, said the lawyer, would be for her to abandon her child to an orphanage. They would issue him documents there. Orphanages can do that. And then have him adopted. But somehow this alternative was not at all appealing, and I doubted that Anastasia would ever agree. So what to do? When I talked to her about a birth certificate, she responded, "Of course it would be fine if he had one just like everyone else. I suppose I let that slip by without really thinking about it. But do not be concerned. Everything will still work out." Note how she said, "I suppose I let that slip by without really thinking about it." I wonder how many other things she has let slip by. Things which could be taken care of at a future stage. That means we can't fully count on everything working out exactly the way she said. I think we need to examine it all very carefully and at some point make adjustments to adapt it to our reality. On another point, I hear talk about what a poor entrepreneur I am, not being able to print enough copies to keep pace with the demand. Indeed, I really can't at the moment. I have refused to sell exclusive rights to the book to any one publisher. I certainly don't want anyone to have exclusive control over the manuscript and put out whatever print runs they fancy. The publisher I talked with gave me this. The style needs to be edited and made more literary. In its present form, it is only Anastasia's explanations and monologues that make the book worth anything at all. My language is seen as stilted. They suggest I think up a catchier title, something like Dead End in the Taiga, The Healer Girl, or The Girl from Outer Space. But I do not consider Anastasia to be from outer space, nor do I consider her to be at a dead end in the taiga. She herself, after all, simply wants to be man, a normal human being. Of course, I can always exercise my author's privilege, even in confrontation with publishing houses, but a lot of time would be wasted on that. I have been using the proceeds of the initial print run to pay for subsequent runs in the print shop, bypassing the publishing houses altogether, so things will even out in the long run. If someone is interested in assisting along this line to our mutual advantage, I'd be happy to listen, but without condition of exclusive rights. I should also say a few words about a certain situation involving my relationship with my family. The Moscow group now looking after distribution of the book has received a number of letters and telephone calls about this. There have been complaints that calls and letters to my home address indicated in the book have not been met with any intelligible response. I left Novosibirsk, as I mentioned, directly upon my return from the expedition. Subsequent events will be described in my next book. Now I have learnt that my firm is falling apart, and there has been nobody there to reply to my inquiries. I'll see to it and bring it back to life once I finish my writing. As for my wife, I have only spoken to her on the telephone. It was a deeply personal conversation. However, I beg my correspondent's forgiveness for not responding right off, and for my delay in sending out copies of the books. At present, my daughter Polina is there. I have met with her. She will fix everything up, and in the future there should be no repetition of the trouble. I have had long talks with my daughter, and she understands everything. A little later I plan to get a mobile telephone, and I shall be able to chat more personally. I shall definitely respond to all the letters coming in, and maybe even publish some of them. They're worth publishing. They're letters about Russia, about love, about bright aspirations. They show the same energy Elena Ivanova-Roerich talks about in her book, Living Ethics. Thank you for these letters. But one letter in particular, a letter from a 13-year-old girl from Kolomna, named Nastya, deserves to be answered right here and now, along with other girls who have written and will be writing. Here is her letter. Dear Vladmir Megre, my name is Nastya Shapkina from the city of Kolomna. I am 13 years old and I am in grade 7 at school. I read your book, The Ringing Cedar. Anastasia. I really, really liked it. Not just liked. That's not the best word here. It sounds too dry. After reading the book, I got a warm and happy feeling in my heart. They told me a lot about it in hospital. I've got a serious illness, and I have to go to hospital every 2 months, and I really want to get well. And your book was like a ray of light amidst all this darkness and vulgarity. I really want to meet with you, and especially with Anastasia. Could you help me? Right now you're probably thinking, how brash and impolite she is. But that's not true. You see, that's the way we all are. Until we see with our own eyes, we don't believe anyone. I don't even know whether to believe or not. Mama doesn't believe, and no one around here believes. It is so fantastic. And yet, why not? To be honest, I believed, I really did, but all my friends kept saying, fairy tale, fairy tale. I'm confused. Please help me. I think you are a very brave man. You have written the truth. Maybe you haven't told the whole story, but you've told a good part of it. That's for certain. What happened between you and Anastasia? The way you offended her, and then it turned out she wasn't to blame? All sorts of things. Yet still, I think you shouldn't offend a person that way, even if, let's say, she's abnormal or a fake. But that's strictly my personal opinion. You may not agree with it. Vladimir, sorry, I don't know your patronymic. Did Anastasia have a child or not? And if she did, is it a boy or a girl? And what did your wife think of that? And my last question. You wrote that Anastasia's grandfather and great-grandfather rubbed the piece of cedar with their fingers, but you never said that Anastasia did this too. Did she really not do it, or did you just happen to leave it out? Please answer me. I know you get a whole bag full of letters, but please, just a few lines. Goodbye, Anastasia. Dear Nastya, you will most certainly be a healthy, spiritually strong, and pretty girl. I shall ask Anastasia the next time I visit her to help you. Yes, Anastasia has a unique approach to healing. She looks upon illness as a conversation between God and man. An illness can be a warning or a deliverance from something even more terrible. And she showed me examples of this. I'll be telling about them later in a new book. I shall try and persuade her, though she's pretty stubborn about sticking to her views. She says it's only man himself, through his spirit and conscious awareness, who can cure anything without negative side effects, while outside interference is often harmful. Nastya, judging by your reaction to the book, you seem to be already healthier spiritually than a lot of people, and that's the main thing. I'm beginning to realize that that's really the case. As far as whether people around you believe or don't believe in Anastasia's existence, I'll answer you by quoting what someone said at one of my get-togethers with readers. When that question was put to me for the umpteenth time, he got up and declared in a loud voice, "Look, people, you're holding in your hands an impulse of inspiration, a thought bursting forth, a call to action, an idea. It's right there in your hands. What more do you want? A sample of her blood, urine, and feces for analysis? Is there no way you can do without that? After all, the greatest and most important proof is already sitting right there in your hands." You see, Nastya, I've come to the realization that Anastasia is an uncomfortable concept for many, and they would rather she didn't exist at all. After all, she's breaking down a whole lot of technocratic theories, conventions, and priorities against the background of purity emanating from her. We suddenly start to become aware of our own filth, and that's not always what we want, especially when we like to think of ourselves as so good and smart and conscientious no matter what we do. Anastasia said, "I exist for those for whom I exist." I didn't think there was anything special hidden in this statement. Anyone who wants to believe can believe. If they don't want to believe, they don't have to. However, I was mistaken. Some people read and nothing happens with them. Others, they find a great feeling of love, kindness, and inspiration welling up in their hearts. And like a shower of spring rain, the world feels this grand poetry of love, a poetry with the heart which is capable of perceiving the light, magnifying it, and sharing it with others. These are the people who feel her and know that she does exist. As for my wife, Nastya, she reacted the way most women probably would. We've only spoken on the telephone, but my daughter, Polina, is ready to help me. She understands everything and brings me letters. She was the one who brought me yours. You say it was wrong on my part to offend Anastasia that way. Of course it's wrong. I would never do anything like that again. The same people can be different at different times. Our son was born. He is such a strong little lad, smiles all the time, and Anastasia is happy and enjoying her life. My best to you and to your mama. I wish you joy and happiness in your life. You deserve it. You are a strong girl, and you can make your friends happier too, more consciously aware of things. A word about religious believers, their inquiries and questions. I have spoken about Anastasia with members of the clergy from our Russian Orthodox Church, as well as with representatives of various denominations. Some of them are quite favorably disposed to her. Others say, with some apprehension, that she's most likely a heathen. She could break down people's faith in religious doctrine, or resurrect idolatry, or something nobody knows about yet, and it's wrong for her not to be baptized. Her attitude to religion will be discussed in greater detail in the second book, and it's really quite extraordinary. I'll just mention a few points here. You see, she told me, it is a good thing that they are already talking about the soul, about the good, the light. Who is the most worthy? I am unable to say. But what about the sects? I countered. The sects that have been banned. Now everyone says that they took the wrong path. Their actions were wrong. Do you think so? Then think of this. A group of soldiers is out on patrol. One of them in the lead has broken off or gone to one side and gets blown up by a mine. Yes, you can say he took the wrong path, his actions were wrong, but you can also say that these same actions saved other people's lives. In any case, Anastasia, which religion do you think is the closest to you, the one most comprehensible? Vladimir, let us say you had never seen your parents or talked with them. You would probably be happy to hear anyone talk about them, even if they each talked about them a little differently. Where the truth lies, you can judge for yourself after reflecting on everything inside you. After all, you are their offspring. You are your parents' child. As for me, though, I do not need any intermediaries. Well, okay. That's enough about doubts. There are some rather pleasant phenomena that Anastasia has somehow managed to bring about in our reality. I was especially skeptical that she would actually be able to infuse something into the text of the book. These are her own combinations and rhythms, as she said, coming from the depth of eternity. But after the first edition came out, in a run of only 4,000 copies, something incredible happened. Many people were so moved by feelings and emotions that poetic verses began flooding in all by themselves. There are a whole lot of them now. They're just ordinary people, not professional poets, who have been writing. There are enough poems to date to put out a whole separate volume of them. In the Moscow group devoted to studying Anastasia's phenomenon, they say that nowhere in the world, in the past or present, has there ever been a person or figure capable of provoking such a huge poetic outpouring in so short a time. Another surprising thing is that while in the first book there is almost nothing said about faith or Russia, the majority of the reader's poems speak directly about faith and Russia and bright aspirations. And it seems to me they do this most inspiringly. And this had a calming effect on my thought about Anastasia's influence. After all, the Bible tells us how to distinguish the bad from the good, the false prophet from the bearer of truth. It says, "By their fruits ye shall know them." And if Anastasia's aspirations and her combinations bring forth such radiant poetic feelings, those are undoubtedly good fruit. And I even thought, if this goes on much longer, she's going to turn half the population of Russia into poets, enamored of their motherland, the earth, and all nature around them. I sorted the poems into several categories: anonymous poems, signed poems, poems by soldiers, and poems by government officials. And do you know what this kind of sorting shows? It shows that there is absolutely no point in dividing society up the way we sometimes do, and blaming our troubles on certain categories of people, like entrepreneurs, the military, government officials. Their hearts all beat in exactly the same way, and across all these categories there are people sincerely striving for the light, for the good. As for our troubles, they're something we probably all produce by ourselves. In this edition of the book, 1. Anastasia's Ray. Into our busy, bustling life of lonely souls in crowds immersed, from the vast universe of space, a ray broke through to the earth. It glistened brighter than the light of the sun or of gold of the purest hue. My people, greetings! Here I am as your brother, speaking to you. I have been sent to you by love, sent to you by the ages' call. Come to me and take of mine, I give myself to all. Wait there, my friend. Where are you going? Why is there sadness on your face? You've been forsaken. Yes, I know. I know all time and space. Dear people, what are you thinking, people? The world is beautiful, no end. I can do everything, dear people, because I am your friend. But the crowd only surged against the ray, rushing along on their fashion-shod feet, and kept on shoving it away into a puddle in the street. The ray dipped into the dirty slush, it felt no offense, and shed no tear, but all at once the slush burst forth in a water spring crystal clear. And then a little boy came running, and fearing no punishment therefrom, he leapt feet first in the puddle, and drew on the ray's sweet balm. His mamma got angry with despair, and wildly waved her arms in dread. But Pushkin's statue on the square suddenly came to life and said, Now wait! You must not spank the boy. He did not act just out of fun. Pay heed to him. Your hearts will be illuminated by your sun. Come near and feel his moistened hands. Come close and touch your blessed son. And you will find there in his palms all that the poets have sung, all they've created through the ages, reflected there within the heart. Mama, mamochka, my mama. The little boy hugged his mom. Mama, can you hear the singing? Hear the song of happy birds? You shall know, dear Mama, yes, you know it. I shall write you a verse. And now you will be happy, Mama, for that is what I want for you. You see, I hear it. Yes, I hear it. I think I can do it, too. Into our busy, bustling life of lonely souls in crowds immersed, fought from the vast universe of space, a ray broke through to the earth. Author unknown. 2. Anastasia, Anas, on the image and heroine of Vladmir Megre's book, Anastasia. In Russia, Megre wrote this brand new idea. In book publications and newspaper lines, the ringing cedar, or Anastasia, which drew attention to himself at the same time. It's not the first time that this name I've heard spoken, and yet it is still not that common a name. Yes, Anastasia, so music-evoking, or Stasia, or Stacy, they all mean the same. The Stacys I know live in cities of shadows, their character simple, of good honest worth. But here in the taiga, in a cedar-ringed meadow, I glimpse a fair goddess, the fairest on earth. Anas, a Siberian of nature's creation, in harmony with her environment lives. Her conscious awareness, her love, inspiration to animals, plants, all around her she gives. Her feelings and thoughts are in tune with the living. The mind of the cosmos is simple and clear. In all of our wide world, believe me, there's nothing escaping her knowledge of stars or light years. Clairvoyant Anas cures disease at all stages. The great ringing cedar enhances her reach. She draws upon cultures of all lands and ages for logic and meaning and riches of speech. And an analyst practicing nature's ecology, her meaning of life is in tune with the world. Intuitive grasper of highest astrology, there's nothing impossible for this precious girl. Mikhailov, Moscow. 3. The Kind Wizard Girl. Galenzik's dolmens, the years, wind back. Time has opened a window, just a crack, for the stretches of infinity to be understood, evaluated, felt through and through, recognized as fact. Stepping over my threshold limit, through the light of good in the blue expanses way up high, I come to you, Anastasia, born again, in the twinkling of an eye. You are a flower of consciousness and will, your might from cedar trees and forest leaves, and from such charming, mystical, magical thoughts that I am ready to be one who simply believes. Every beast and insect, raven and jay, every serpent, blade of grass and hay, you wizard girl, kind maven of the way, so many aroused by what you have to say, your thoughts, ideas, even stronger now today, shed light on all the earth with their bright ray. 4. Anastasia's love. To the woman of my beloved, I shall pray for you are loved, the woman of my own beloved. As his heart's desire, you will be blessed. You will be blessed as I wish for you the best. Keep him safe when he is strong, or weak, or brave. Keep him safe when he may irrationally behave. Keep him, my beloved, safe and sweet. My days, it seems, have flashed by in a beat. Their crazy dance has burnt with me its heat. My years have started passing all too fleet. My son has started walking on his feet. Your papa is the very best, my son, the very best. It is I who did not manage to open up to him. In life, my son, that can happen on a whim. Another woman takes his fancy and steps in. You are both caressed by the gentle breeze of spring, which tells me in the whisper of the leaves how he feels the warmth, how he feels the joy. Both from your hands and from your lips, I shall not dare distract him from the warmth and tenderness of your eyes. But should that not be enough, I shall send you a ray of sunlight to relieve you of your grief. The years will fly past just like a stormy night. Life will seem to you like an empty room. I, as a fading star falling to earth from above, shall chase from your soul the nighttime gloom, and I shall be able to pray, please do believe, so that you, by the light ray illumed, need feel no withering love. I shall be able to pray, for you are loved, the woman of my own beloved. Author unknown. 5. To Anastasia. To a woman I dedicate this verse. I write as an Air Force flyer. A poet I could never be. But my heart flared true, my breast with fire did burst. Anastasia, do not think me brash. I can't stop loving you. Your image, a touching pulse for good. Pulse louder than any engine ever could. My engine failed. Visibility nil. An explosion in the twinkling of an eye. But then your ray of light, your image, flashed and blessed. On fragile wings it kept me in flight. A single moment it took, only one, I wished, as I looked until my landing gear touched safely down, that I were a blade of glass upon the grass, upon the ground, by your fingers tenderly caressed. Author unknown. 6. The cedar forest rings and chimes. To Vladmir Megre. Ah, the fragrance of Siberian cedars, the smell of resin very strong, the taiga vast, almost half a globe sweeping, stretching to one grand, endless song. The cedars keep peace since times of old, maintaining the energy of the earth to brighten the pulse beat of the soul. They ring for all mankind these words. Here dwells among us Anastasia, in spiritual purity's forest art. She watches over Mother Russia through people's holiness of heart. She sends out thoughts and calls to action, to the highway leading to heavenly light, the essence of Veles, Krishna, Rama, Shiva, Buddha, Allah, Christ. These holy thoughts, the star-bright logos, old Russian purity, their theme, are flying like snowstorms, calling the ages to penetrate to the heart of the dream. With me are the forces of light, unchanging. I exist for all who walk and plod. I give to all a bright awakening who do not turn their back on God. Bow before holy Russia's leading. Bow to her gods, our creators above, in the never-ceasing ring of the cedars which defy the light as love. So Russians, turn, and with your soul pay heed to all that heaven gives. On the rivers of Lena, Yana, and Ob, God's temple of all the Russians live. Step out on the upward road to the light, the cosmic self-programming path discern. We look to your goals as you answer all right. So Russia may to her gods return. Preserver of the cosmic energy of nature, the ringing cedar waits for the one who loves his Russia as God the Savior, whose heart its course for others has run. Then live in peace and love for nature, brook no dishonesty, live aright, draw wisdom's radiance from the people's favor, and show to others the pathway to light. Such people are called by Anastasia to accept my energy's gentle load, so that the bright force's attentive idea may help those climbing up the road. The cedars call everyone to hope for the prize, on the path to divinity, to beauty's gleam. Awaken, my people, open your eyes. Reach out to others, to the heart of the dream. The cosmic expanse opens wide its doors to awakened pilgrims on their climb. To those united on the upward course, the whole cedar forest rings and chimes. President of the Cosmos Society of Russian Space Exploration Committee, Moscow. 7. To Goddesses. Do not come here to see my shame, or think with mute reproach to bless, nor hand nor secret stare can claim, to lift the cross from my poor chest. No earthbound cry will scare away the soul of heavenly confusion. It will not blight the holy ray of mind and feelings interfusion. The world is full of sun and storm, of finger snaps and love's fire too. Here ashes, flame, blood, tears are born, where mind is false but feelings true. Wild honey becomes bitter, surely, no sweetness from the wormwood's bloom. Pretenders will not grasp the worldly, the afterlife the wise will doom. All stories, letters, poems, flowers will waken to the heavenly blue. I see two goddesses, two powers, these are my poetry and you. Verse should not be debased as phantom, it will not see a final breath. You are immortal, we are random, in poems just like birth and death. A physicist. Chapter 31. Author's Message to Entrepreneurs. The author's attempt to organize a fellowship of Russian entrepreneurs in accord with certain spiritual principles has revealed an evident desire for such a coming together on the part of many entrepreneurs. Notices were sent out all over Moscow. A wider distribution throughout Russia would have entailed a substantial expenditure. The lack of funding, and consequently the ultimate failure of the project, led to nowhere. Anastasia's plans began to seem unrealizable. During my second visit with her, however, she told me there were no dead-end situations, only that I should not have altered the sequence she had prescribed. The book should have come first, which would have spread the right information and prevented the organizational principles from being tied to monetary concerns. This second visit also settled one other question. An organizational task force had to be set up in Moscow to spearhead the formation of the fellowship, but we could not come to a decision on either the selection criteria for the new members or how the selection committee should be constituted. Anastasia stated the following: one's heartfelt impulsion and one's aspiration to strive for such a fellowship are the principal criteria for eligibility. Nobody has the right to refuse access to anyone manifesting such qualities. One's past record is irrelevant, for the one who has the most worthy yesterday may well turn out to be the least worthy today, and vice versa. Subsequently, when you get together to determine the eligibility criteria according to the impulses of your hearts, you will also be able to work out the specific terms on which applicants are accepted into the fellowship. The blame for altering the sequence prescribed by Anastasia falls, of course, on me. To all those Moscow entrepreneurs who wanted to join the fellowship, I hereby offer my sincere apologies, first, for postponing the initial conference to a later date, and secondly, for the consequent drain on your time and finances. The task force was indeed made up of dedicated entrepreneurs. Many of you had limited time to devote to this project, but you found the time, or stole it from something else. You worked on drafting documents and the principles for this future society. The secretariat, too, similarly made up of Muscovites, was fueled by enthusiasm. In addition, Moscow students put together a magnificent computer version of the Future Society's catalog. It made it all the more painful for me to look back once I realized my mistake and see the hopelessness of the situation. The only way out was to muster the strength needed to correct the mistake and write the book. Without a word of explanation to anyone, explanation seemed impossible at that point, I went off by myself and began to write. It is only now that the book exists and is spreading more and more right across Russia and starting to fulfill the function specified for it by Anastasia that I can talk about the future. I am more confident now about the possibility of seeing such a society actually come into being. The reaction to the book indicates that it will attract a sufficient number of entrepreneurs from the various regions of the country. The conference will take place. There will be a fellowship. In acting on my own, I may well have offended some of those who worked alongside me in Moscow. I shall particularly like to single out 3 Moscow students who gave their all to assisting and participating in the Secretariat of the Future Society. They were the ones who keyboarded the text of the first book on their computers and kept on keyboarding even after their exam session started. I wasn't in a position to compensate them for their work. They knew this, understood the situation, but still went on keyboarding. Others, too, would have probably reacted with understanding, had they known the whole picture. If that applies to any of you, I apologize for my lack of trust in you and for my temporary disappearance. Of course, there is a great deal more I need to learn and understand, including the degree to which Anastasia herself has been involved in all this. I'd like to know just how this reclusive young woman from the Siberian taiga managed not only to draw up plans like these, but also to have them implemented in real life. It's not that she is predicting the future. She is literally creating the future. She struggles to bring it about and feels the struggle in her heart. In fact, it is something on the order of a master business plan, which she has formulated in her head, keeping track of all its details down to the nuances of psychological probabilities. She's working her hardest to make it come about, and calling on us to participate in its realization. But we are not simply blind mice, but normal, professionally experienced adults, and we must understand that a single individual, especially one still relatively new to the entrepreneurial practice, cannot foresee everything ahead of time. Anastasia affirms, just the organization alone, the spiritual, yes spiritual, contact among such people as entrepreneurs is a salutary reaction of cosmic proportions. There is no need to dictate what will happen next. What will happen next will point out its own path and set its priorities in the occurrences of daily life. What kind of reaction is this? What path is she alluding to? Even though her aspiration to the light can be felt intuitively, nevertheless, we must make sense of everything ourselves and work out the details. I wish you all happiness and success. Dreams Coming True. Editor's Afterward. In the summer of 1996, a tired-looking man was standing on a street corner in downtown Moscow with a self-published 96-page volume in his hands, trying to sell it to passerbys. The book's title was The Ringing Cedar, Anastasia, and the man called himself Vladmir Megre. A woman stopped by, looked at the inconspicuous cover, talked to the author, and bought a copy. Next day she was back, smiling, her eyes shining, to pick up an entire pack to give to everybody she knew. As it was, the first print run of 2,000 copies of Anastasia sold out in a matter of weeks. What happened next was as miraculous as the story Vladmir Megre had written down. New print runs, first of 2,000, then 10,000, sold out within weeks. Not long afterward, millions more were printed and sold. By 1999, Vladmir Megre was one of Russia's most popular authors, and the 7 books published to date have sold over 10 million copies in their original Russian alone, not counting their translated editions in more than a dozen languages. The books in the Ringing Cedar series started producing incredible changes in people's hearts and minds, the effect of which is now being felt throughout Russia and beyond. What happened here? How can it be that with no advertisement other than word of mouth, this book by an unknown author became a national, then an international bestseller, distributed initially by readers alone before it was accepted by even a single bookstore? How can it be that one copy from this first 2,000-copy print run actually found its way to the stacks of the U.S. Library of Congress? Why have people of all ages, from school children to pensioners, and in all walks of life, from teachers to public officials and from scientists to clergymen, felt such inspiration from the book to the point of writing poetry and creating works of art? Why did a former member of the Russian Parliament, an economist by the name of Dr. Viktor Medikov, write an entire book, Putin, Megre, and Russia's Future, stating that the Ringing Cedars was becoming Russia's new national idea? Why did the Supreme Mufti of Russia, Talgat Tajudin, publicly declare in a televised interview, "I love these books. I've read them and got a lot out of them for myself"? Why have leaders of other confessions made equally laudatory remarks? Why did my mother once bring home a copy of Anastasia from her yoga class on the recommendation of her instructor and gingerly request that I read it? Why, when applying to enter the doctoral program in forestry at 6 top-rated American universities, I submitted a research proposal based on the ideas set forth by Anastasia, I was accepted by all of them. 4 of the schools, in fact, offered me full financial support with a scholarship. And here I am now at the University of Missouri at Columbia, writing my PhD dissertation on the significance of ideas from the Ringing Cedars for the future of forestry and agriculture in Russia and the world as a whole. But here comes the most striking part. How can it be that all these developments, from the wild popularity of the Ringing Cedars series to the outpouring of readers' poetry and art, had been described in the very first book before coming to pass? As it is, true to what Anastasia said in the very first volume, millions of people have been moved by her words. Many thousands have planted trees, written poetry and songs, or created works of art, all inspired by the book. Readers' clubs have proliferated throughout Russia and abroad. Numerous readers' conferences throughout Russia and Europe have brought together thousands of people asking questions they had never even thought of before. In just the scant few years since the book's initial publication, Russia has witnessed the birth of powerful eco-village movement, inspiring thousands of people to leave their jobs in large cities and, despite formidable obstacles, move to one of the many eco-settlements now sprouting all over the country. Russian immigrants to Germany, America, and Canada have been flocking back to their homeland to establish new self-sufficient homesteads on their ancestors' land. In the eco-village where my family now owns a plot of land, our neighbors include economists, singers, entrepreneurs, engineers, writers, mechanics, managers, and executives, artists, peasants, young families, single mothers, pensioners, and even school children, coming from all over Russia and other countries once part of the Soviet Union, from Moscow to Irkutsk, and from Ivanovo to Kazakhstan and Tajikistan. Whence comes all this inspiration? The answer is simple. Anastasia resonates so strongly in tune with people's hearts that one cannot fail to inwardly recognize the truth emanating from it. How many times have I heard personal examples of this instant recognition? People who have been searching for years or decades for meaningful answers to questions on the purpose of life, on man's place in nature, have finally found them in this book. But should it be surprising that the image of a way of life founded in the ideals of love, beauty, and nonviolence, as presented by Anastasia, would resonate so strongly with our inner self? After all, does not every one of us want to live in a free society of kind and happy people, in a world without wars, crime, or oppression, in a world where not a single tear need run down a child's cheek, and where families live in love and prosperity? Do we not want to live without monstrous industries destroying and polluting both nature and man? Do we not want to enjoy creative labor for the benefit of both our families and our communities, instead of suffering through boring jobs merely to enrich faceless corporations? Do we not want a society based on mutual help and cooperation rather than competition? But, you may say, this was just Anastasia's dream, or just Vladmir Megre's dream. And a dream is simply a dream. But cannot each of us dream of a desirable future and then act to bring this future about? Is it not what John Lennon was singing about in his Imagine? You may say I am a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will live as one. Is it not what one of the greatest economists of the 20th century, E.F. Schumacher, was referring to in his seminal work, Small is Beautiful? Now, it might be said that this is romantic, a utopian vision. True enough. What we have today in modern industrial society is not romantic and certainly not utopian, as we have it right here. But it is in very deep trouble and holds no promise of survival. We jolly well have to have the courage to dream if we want to survive and give our children a chance of survival. The crises of the industrial society will become worse and end in disaster until or unless we develop a new lifestyle which is compatible with the real needs of human nature, with the health of living nature around us, and with the resource endowment of the world. Fortunately, the disaster still may be averted, as more and more people in Russia and throughout the world, drawing their inspiration from the ringing cedars, acquire the courage to dream, and create an image of radiant reality for themselves and their children, and then get down to work in this direction. The spiritual and practical revelations presented in this book are unparalleled in so many areas that their discussion could fill entire volumes. Let me but mention Anastasia's beloved Dachniks, a discovery of exceptional significance. As it happens, the most obvious and significant things often go most easily unnoticed. This is particularly true about Russia's dacha movement. Judge for yourself. Anastasia and Vladmir Megre were the first to speak about the importance of Dachniks. Now it turns out that according to widely available official statistics published every year in Russia's primary statistical source, over 35 million families, and this amounts to 70% of the country's population, grow their own food on their plots and collectively provide far more vegetables, fruit, and even meat and milk than the whole country's commercial agriculture taken together. Why had nobody paid attention to these numbers earlier? Why didn't they ever surface in the discussion on the present and future of Russia, and indeed the world's agriculture? Why did nobody take seriously President Boris Yeltsin's confession that he was spending his weekends tending a vegetable garden, growing potatoes and radishes? Should you choose to research for yourself the questions discussed by Anastasia, you will soon discover the truth of her assertion that her knowledge is already shared, at least partially, by a number of people in our world, and that collectively they know practically everything, only they do not fully understand how it works. Take communication with plants, for example. It sounds incredible at first, but it only requires the reading of Peter Tompkins and Christopher Bird's well-researched The Secret Life of Plants to gain an entirely new perspective and conclude, she must be right. But could it be possible that all diseases are curable through such interaction with plants, as Anastasia argues? It would take a complex and lengthy scientific study to test this hypothesis. Fortunately, this is not necessary, as, in addition to a growing number of personal testimonies from thousands of people, there is factual evidence at hand that can dispel any doubts. Over centuries and millennia, the Hunzakut, a people living in a valley in northern Pakistan, have been practicing an agriculture very similar to the one described by Anastasia, eating food exclusively from their family garden plots, thus establishing a closed loop of matter and information exchange between people and their plants. They are recognized as the most healthy and long-living people on the earth. The Hunzakut commonly live to more than 100 years, and men becoming fathers at age 90 is not a rarity. Can it be that this information changes between an individual person and a plant Anastasia talks about is the missing link to understanding human nutrition? Even in the absence of scientific studies, why not try it? The science will catch up. Furthermore, why should we be skeptical about Anastasia's ability to live without concern for acquiring food or clothing, effortlessly relying on nature for a complete life support system? Is not the exact same ideal of life taught to humanity in the Bible? He who watches the wind will not sow, and he who looks at the clouds will not reap. Or, take no thought for your life, what ye shall eat, or what ye shall drink. Also, in our own not-so-distant past, Nobel laureate Albert Schweitzer testified on the basis of his experiences in Africa. In return for very little work, nature supplies the native with nearly everything that he requires for his support. Looking around, should one doubt that truly happy children can only be raised in nature? Jean Liedloff, who spent 2.5 years in a society living in close relationship to nature, and consequently knowing no such things as crying children, crime, or depression, speaks about this in her book, The Continuum Concept, with very much the same conclusions as Anastasia. Again, this list could continue. In fact, researchers could and probably will write volumes of commentary on almost every statement contained in Anastasia. Yes, doubts naturally do creep in. It still sounds all too improbable to our traditional way of thinking. and even if the heart feels a genuine light emanating from the book, the mind often refuses to accept it as real. This is an all too familiar dilemma, fully experienced even by Vladmir Megre himself. However, as the series progresses and you come to embrace the ever more significant revelations set forth in the subsequent volumes and immerse yourself in the ever more poetic language, the idea that it could all be simply thought up should gradually melt away. You hold in your hands a flower which will unfold its petals to reveal a most remarkable masterpiece, unique in all of Russia's literature and possibly the world's as well. Indeed, its significance goes far beyond literature. This book possesses a tremendous, unprecedented potential to change life on our whole planet for the better. Do you know of any other book that in a matter of just a few years has succeeded in not only stirring the hearts and minds of millions of people, but also arousing these same people to extraordinary acts of creation in their everyday lives, developing new modes of expression in all the arts, taking or embracing non-violent initiatives to preserve and enhance life on this planet as we know it? Every day, more and more people are joining in. Now that the Ringing Cedars is globally available in English, the realization of Anastasia's dream is certain to take on planetary proportions. I have no doubt about it. In the winter of 2003, at my office in downtown Moscow, just 1 block away from the street corner outside of the metro station where Vladmir Megre had been selling the first copies of his book only 6 years earlier, Igor Vladmirov, head of Anastasia's Reader Club in St. Petersburg, mused one day, looking at the snowflakes dancing outside the window. Wouldn't it be wonderful to have Anastasia published in English? It would, I agreed. You are a professional project manager, and you speak English fluently, isn't that true? Yes, more or less. Then why are you sitting here? We laughed. A subsequent chain of circumstances and events led me to certain people, including Vladmir Megre himself, who became instrumental in carrying out the English translation project. The story of the unusual coincidences and struggles behind this edition could easily form the stuff of a suspense thriller, which I shall probably write one day. In the meantime, I take comfort in the fact that you are now holding a masterfully translated volume in your hands. This is a good indication that dreams really do come true. Columbia, Missouri, USA, January 2005. Leonid Sharashkin.